Hello students, welcome back. Myself Dr. Gibran Ahmad presents to you Simply Pathology, and today we are back with a very important lecture. Today we are going to discuss thalassemia. Now before I start with thalassemia, I would just like to tell you a basic way in which you can write an answer for any hematology topic. So for any of this topic, whether it be hereditary spherocytosis, G6PD deficiency, thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, for any of these topics, first you try to give an introduction. That should be followed by the etiopathogenesis, and this should be followed by the morphology. So what do you mean by morphology? By morphology we simply mean that we should mention about the gross and the microscopic picture of that particular disease. Now one very important point that should be included in every answer for hemolytic anemia is the lab diagnosis, and finally we have to end with the clinical feature. So without wasting any time, let us start today's topic of discussion. So today's topic of discussion is thalassemia. So as I told you, for any of such topics we will first start with the introduction. So thalassemia, as we know, it is a hereditary hemolytic anemia, and it is classically characterized by decreased synthesis of hemoglobin because of decreased globin chain synthesis. Remember, there is no problem with the structure of the hemoglobin. This structure of the hemoglobin is absolutely normal. It is normal in thalassemia. The only problem that we are facing is that there is a decreased production. The only problem is decreased hemoglobin production. Why? Because of decreased globin chain synthesis. So let us try to understand this globin chain synthesis scenario. Now we have to understand one thing, that normally, okay, in you and me, in individuals like you and me, in majority we are having hemoglobin A, which is comprised of two chains. One is alpha chain, one is beta chain. So normally we are having two alpha chains and we are having two beta chains. Okay, so this alpha chain is normally synthesized by a pair of alpha globin gene. So there is a pair, okay, so there is a pair of alpha globin genes synthesizing alpha chain, whereas the beta chain is synthesized by pair of beta globin gene. Okay, sorry, not a pair, but there is a single, okay, just single beta globin gene. There is single beta globin gene. Okay, so this is first point of difference, that alpha chain is synthesized by a pair of alpha globin gene, whereas beta chain is synthesized by a single beta globin gene. Okay, now which chromosome is responsible for synthesis of alpha globin? It is the chromosome. This particular gene is present in chromosome number 16, which is an important MCQ, whereas the beta globin gene, it is present in chromosome number 11. Okay, now very important that suppose in case of thalassemia there is a specific kind of genetic alteration that occurs. Okay, there is a deletion of alpha globin gene. Okay, they are deleted, because of which there is decreased synthesis. There is a decreased synthesis of alpha globin chain. This is again an MCQ. There is a deletion. So what kind of genetic alteration is there? There is a deletion involving the alpha globin gene. Whereas on the other hand, the genetic alteration seen in beta globin gene is your point mutation. So point mutations occurs in the beta globin gene, and this point mutation in the beta globin gene is going to give rise to decreased synthesis of beta globin chain. Okay, so if an individual is suffering from deletion of the alpha globin gene, then that individual is going to develop alpha thalassemia, where there is a decreased amount of alpha globin chain. Alpha chains are decreased in amount, decreased alpha globin chain. Whereas individuals who are having point mutations involving the beta globin gene, or these individuals are going to suffer from beta thalassemia, which is characterized by decreased amount of beta globin chain. So this is what is basically happening in thalassemia. So what is the basic mechanism? What is the basic mechanism of anemia? How anemia is developing over here? There are two mechanisms. The first mechanism is clear. There is a decreased synthesis of hemoglobin. Why? Because of decreased globin chain synthesis. Because of decreased globin chain synthesis. Now, if alpha chain is less in amount, we will develop alpha thalassemia. If beta chain is less in amount, then we develop beta thalassemia. Okay. But the second very important point is that the second cause of anemia over here is something called as ineffective erythropoiesis. There is ineffective erythropoiesis. What is the meaning of this? The meaning is before the RBC comes into the circulation, this RBC undergoes hemolysis within the bone marrow. It undergoes hemolysis in the bone marrow. Now let me make you understand that why this hemolysis is taking place. So just pay a little bit of attention over here, that what is the cause of ineffective erythropoiesis. Let us take the example of beta thalassemia. Now what is happening in case of beta thalassemia? If you see over here, basically normally we have 2 alpha and 2 beta chain. In beta thalassemia, this particular beta chain is not there. So what will happen? There is an excessive amount of alpha chain, which is going to give rise to alpha 4 tetramer. Okay, alpha 4 tetramer. Now this alpha 4 tetramer is not suitable. Okay, and this alpha 4 tetramer can precipitate inside the RBCs. It precipitates and it can cause red cell hemolysis, leading to ineffective erythropoiesis. Okay, so this is basically the major introduction part of thalassemia. Next, we are going to individually see about beta thalassemia and then alpha thalassemia. We now come to the second part of this lecture, that is beta thalassemia. So first we discuss about beta thalassemia followed by alpha thalassemia. Now as we have already discussed, beta thalassemia occurs because of decreased synthesis of beta globin chain, okay, which is basically because of point mutations, which is taking place in beta globin gene, which is present in chromosome number 11. Okay, so these two are very important MCQs. Now let us see, there are two kinds of mutation which is taking place in case of beta thalassemia. Let us try to understand. So first we discuss about the molecular genetics of thalassemia. Now you must have heard that I have been speaking about point mutation. So what kind of point mutation is involving beta gene? There are two kinds. One kind of mutation called as beta 0 mutation. Now when this mutation occurs, then there is no synthesis of beta globin chain. As a result, there is a complete absence of beta globin chain. And the other kind of mutation is beta plus mutation. This mutation basically is characterized by a reduced synthesis. There is a reduced but detectable synthesis of beta globin chain. Okay, so this is very important to understand that there is a beta 0 mutation, there is a beta plus mutation. Beta 0 mutation has no synthesis of globin chain. Beta plus mutation is having some synthesis of the globin chain. Now very important thing to include over here in the molecular genetic part is that there are three important type of mutations that occur. Okay, so if we see that in case of thalassemia, in case of beta thalassemia, there is more than 100 type of point mutation. But here we are going to discuss only three important mutations. So what are those three important mutations? Let us try and see. So, three important point mutations that we are going to consider in the pathogenesis of beta thalassemia. Number one, if we see, is your splicing mutation. Splicing mutation. Now, this kind of point mutation most commonly gives rise to beta plus thalassemia. Okay, beta plus. So it is not a severe form. There is reduced but detectable synthesis of beta globin chain seen over here. So what is the basic thing that happens? There is an abnormal splicing, which is taking place, which gives rise to both normal mRNA as well as it gives rise to abnormal mRNA. Okay. So this normal mRNA will give rise to some amount of beta globin chain, and this abnormal mRNA will result in abnormal amount of beta chain, because of which there is a reduced synthesis, reduced beta globin chain synthesis. Okay. Now the second kind of mutation which is occurring, the second kind of mutation that is occurring is also called as promoter region mutation. Promoter region mutation. Now this promoter region mutation, actually it reduces your transcription process, your transcription by 75 to 80%. Okay. So that means that some amount of hemoglobin, that is approximately 20 to 25% normal beta globin chain is synthesized. So this type of mutation, that is the promoter region mutation, is giving rise to beta plus thalassemia. Beta plus thalassemia. So there is a reduced but detectable amounts of beta globin chain which is seen. And the third very important and the most severe kind of mutation that is there is called as chain terminator mutation. Chain terminator mutation. Now what happens in this case? There is a complete block in translation. There's a complete block of translation. Okay. Complete block of translation. Why? Because of a nonsense mutation. Because of a nonsense mutation that is leading to premature stop codon. So the basically the beta globin chain synthesis, it stopped prematurely. So the premature stop codon is encountered, and because of this there is a block in the process of translation. Ultimately this gives rise to beta 0 thalassemia. Beta 0 thalassemia. That is, there is no production of beta globin chain, and the chain terminator mutation is the most common cause of beta 0 thalassemia. Beta 0 thalassemia. Okay, so this is your molecular genetics of beta thalassemia. Now we are going to understand about the pathogenesis of beta thalassemia. Let us understand the pathogenesis of beta thalassemia with this particular diagram. Pay attention. Now, as I told you, what is the basic problem which is taking place? So normally in our body we are having HbA, which is having alpha 2 beta 2 chain. In case of beta thalassemia, there is a reduced beta globin with an excess of alpha globin. So what is going to happen? Insoluble alpha 4 aggregate is going to take place, and this insoluble alpha 4 aggregate, it is going to cause RBC membrane damage. As a result, majority of the RBC, before it comes out of the bone marrow over here, it is going to undergo what is called as ineffective erythropoiesis. So most erythroblasts are going to die inside the bone marrow, but around 20-25% of the RBCs, they are going to escape and they are going to enter the circulation. But even these RBCs, they are not perfect. They are still containing this alpha globin aggregate, and what will happen that they are going to be trapped by the spleen. They are going to be trapped in the mononuclear phagocyte system, that is in the spleen, bone marrow, liver, and as a result they are going to undergo extravascular hemolysis. Okay, so even outside the bone marrow, these RBCs are not going to survive. As a result, the patient is going to develop anemia. Now, once the patient develops anemia, what is going to happen? There will be tissue hypoxia, and compensatorily, as a compensation, the body is going to increase the release of erythropoietin. This increased erythropoietin synthesis is going to cause bone marrow expansion. So the marrow is going to expand, leading to skeletal deformities. So what happens? There is a expansion of the bone marrow leading to periosteal new bone formation, especially in the skull. The new bone is forming like this, which is giving an appearance of a crew cut. It is giving an appearance of a crew cut. So let me just show you. This is the classical crew cut appearance that we see. Crew cut appearance. It is not specific for thalassemia. It can be seen in other hemolytic anemias. For example, in sickle cell anemia, you can also see. So you can see over here that there is a new bone formation over here. Yes, so the new bone formation. So the X-ray film is showing new bone formation producing perpendicular radiations resembling a crew cut. Okay, classically seen in thalassemia. Okay, now along with that, when the patient is suffering from anemia, so we are going to give certain blood transfusions to the patient, yes or no? Now this blood transfusion is going to increase the systemic iron overload. Okay, along with this, the ineffective erythropoiesis, it inhibits the liver. Okay, it suppresses the release of hepcidin from the liver. So if you remember, hepcidin is a negative regulator of iron absorption. So if there is a decreased amount of hepcidin, okay, as a result, there will be an increased iron absorption by the gut enterocytes, ultimately leading to systemic iron overload, leading to secondary hemochromatosis. And it will lead to hemosiderosis. Okay, hemosiderosis. Okay, so this is basically the pathogenesis of beta thalassemia. Now, as we already mentioned, that whenever there is an ineffective erythropoiesis over here, okay, what is going to happen? It is going to increase the amount of erythroferrone, which is going to decrease the hepcidin production, leading to increased iron absorption. So this is all about the pathogenesis of beta thalassemia, and now we are going to next discuss the variants, the beta thalassemia major and the minor, along with the lab diagnosis. Now we are going to discuss about the clinical syndromes in thalassemia. Okay, so we are reading about the beta thalassemia, and we have read in details about the etiopathogenesis of beta thalassemia. Now we are going to understand what are the clinical syndromes present in beta thalassemia. There are three clinical syndromes which is present. One is beta thalassemia major, one is beta thalassemia minor, and in between the two is beta thalassemia intermedia. Now this beta thalassemia major, okay, it is a type of thalassemia which is dependent on blood transfusion for survival. Okay, and basically the phenotype, the genotype in this case is beta 0 beta 0, or it is beta plus, or it is beta 0 beta plus. The very important thing is that clinically they require blood transfusion for their survival. So this is a homozygous beta thalassemia. Now if you look at the beta thalassemia minor, okay, it is a heterozygous beta thalassemia. Now it is either beta 0 beta, that is there is a normal and there is an abnormal with complete loss of beta chain synthesis, or there is beta plus beta. In either case, okay, remember these patients are asymptomatic with very mild or absent anemia, and usually they do not require blood transfusion. And in between the two, we are having beta thalassemia intermedia, wherein the genotype is beta 0 beta plus, or it can be beta plus, or it can be beta plus beta. Now these patients, okay, although they show moderate to severe clinical features, they do not require regular blood transfusion, but sometimes they may require as well. So these are the three important clinical syndromes of beta thalassemia. Okay. Now beta thalassemia major. Now this is the first clinical syndrome that we are going to understand, and it is also called as Cooley's anemia. Okay, it is also called as Cooley's anemia. Let us read about some of the important features of beta thalassemia major. It is most common in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean countries. Now the anemia manifests, okay, when the child is 6 to 9 months after birth, okay, when the hemoglobin synthesis is going to shift from HbF to HbA. Now remember, in untransfused patient, the patients will be presenting with anemia wherein the hemoglobin levels will be very low, in the range of 3 to 6 grams per deciliter. Now the red cells, they may completely lack HbA. As I told you, it may have beta 0 genotype, or it might contain very small amounts in beta plus or beta 0 genotype. So these are the three important genotypes of beta thalassemia major. Now over here, the major amount of hemoglobin in the individual is in the form of HbF, okay, and this we are going to see by serum electrophoresis. Along with that, we are also going to see HPLC. We are going to see the graphs also. Okay, remember the HbA2 levels in beta thalassemia major is more or less normal or low. So let us look at the lab diagnosis of beta thalassemia major. Okay, so beta thalassemia major, let us see what is the lab diagnosis. So this is a must in every question relating to hematology. So first, the hemoglobin we have seen, it is in the range of 3 to 6 grams per deciliter. Now if you look at the peripheral blood smear, we see that there's a marked variation in the size and shape of RBCs with anisocytosis and poikilocytosis. Now the RBC size is very small. There is microcytosis. Along with that, there is hypochromia. In the background, we can see certain target cells, fragmented cells, basophilic stippling can be there, and more or less polychromasia as well as NRBCs can be seen as well. So let us look at the peripheral blood smear. So this is the peripheral blood smear. Now you can see one RBC, the size of which is this much small, one is this much small, one is this much small. So there is anisopoikilocytosis is there. Okay. Also, if you see, what are these? These are target cells. Also, if you see over here, there is hypochromasia. Now, if you see, there is hypochromia. There is hypochromia. And if you compare the size of the red cell with the size of a small lymphocyte, so we can say that there is a microcytosis as well. Yes or no? So basically this is presenting as a hemolytic picture. Also there is a presence of what is called as, what are these? These are teardrop cells. These are teardrop cells. Teardrop cells. So this is the classical peripheral blood picture of thalassemia major, showing hemolytic features and certain characteristic peripheral blood features. Okay. Now the third important parameter in the lab diagnosis is the reticulocyte. Now the retic count is elevated, but it is not as much elevated as is required for the degree of anemia. Okay. Now the fourth important lab diagnosis over here is to carry out hemoglobin electrophoresis. This is required for confirmation of diagnosis. And what did we see? That the major form of hemoglobin in such individuals is HbF, and the range is 10 to 98%. So let us look at this particular. Okay, this is the hemoglobin electrophoresis chart. This is the normal chart where the majority is HbA, then small amounts of HbA2 is also there, and very small amount of HbF is there. This is the normal pattern of serum electrophoresis. Now in case of beta thalassemia major, the major amount is your HbF, whereas HbA2 is either normal or low in case of beta thalassemia major. This is the characteristic electrophoresis pattern in case of beta thalassemia major. And this third chart is your HPLC graph. It is a HPLC graph. You can say high performance or high pressure liquid chromatography. You can see this particular graph is showing, this is for HbF, okay? And we have HbA2 also, which is normal or low in case of beta thalassemia major, okay? So this is your HPLC chart, and this is how we recognize, okay? Let us look at this particular. Okay, so the next thing is your HPLC, which shows a HbF peak. Now, if you carry out a bone marrow examination, there is a severe erythroid hyperplasia that we see. Now, some biochemistry parameters, because RBC hemolysis is there, so much amount of hemoglobin is released that is broken down to form bilirubin, and so there is an increased unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. And because as these cells are osmotically, they are resistant, so there's a decreased osmotic fragility. Now prenatal diagnosis can be made by molecular analysis of the DNA. Let us look at the clinical features of beta thalassemia major. Now, in untransfused patients, what do we see? That there's a striking expansion of the hematopoietically active marrow, especially in the bones of the face and skull. They start to expand, okay, and there is a new bone formation giving rise to a crew cut appearance. So let me show you. As I told you, because of ineffective erythropoiesis and anemia, there is an excessive release of erythropoietin, which classically leads to an excessive amount of marrow expansion. Or if you can see, there is a prominent cheekbones. There is a prominent cheekbones because of marrow expansion. Okay, prominent cheekbones. Okay, so basically this characteristic facies that we see is called as thalassemic facies. We call it as thalassemic facies, okay, which is characteristic for Cooley's anemia or beta thalassemia major. Okay, also there is also we have already seen the crew cut appearance in the previous diagram. Now, because the body is suffering from anemia, okay, and the body has to, and the bone marrow is not effective because the bone marrow is undergoing ineffective erythropoiesis is happening in the bone marrow. So elsewhere the body starts to synthesize RBCs. So there's an extramedullary hematopoiesis in the liver and the spleen, giving rise to hepatosplenomegaly. There's a huge hepatosplenomegaly. But the cause of hepatosplenomegaly is not just extramedullary hematopoiesis. Also there is a phagocyte hyperplasia, because more amount of phagocytes are required to remove the dead RBCs. Now, if you remember, there is some amount of extravascular hemolysis which is also taking place, because of which there is extravascular hemolysis leading to phagocyte hyperplasia and hepatosplenomegaly as well. So the cause of hepatosplenomegaly in thalassemia patients are twofold. First, because of phagocyte hyperplasia. Second, because of extramedullary hematopoiesis. Okay. Now, because such patients are dependent on iron and such patients are also having an increased iron absorption, there is an increased iron overload leading to hemosiderosis, systemic deposition of iron. Along with that, there is secondary hemochromatosis. Okay, that is, there is secondary hemochromatosis. So these are the diagram that we have already seen in the lab diagnosis. Okay, we have already seen how the faces are. There's a prominence of the cheek and cheekbones. Okay, there is hepatosplenomegaly, which we have already seen, which is result of extramedullary hematopoiesis. Along with that, there is a cardiac disease also because of cardiac hemosiderosis, because of secondary hemochromatosis or secondary deposition of iron in the heart. Okay, and remember, it is the most common cause of death, or the most important cause of death in patients of beta thalassemia major who is on blood transfusion. Okay, so with transfusion and iron chelation therapy, okay, survival into third decade is possible, but it is not a cure. Hematopoietic stem cell transplantation is the only therapy which can give or provide a cure, and it is being increasingly used. Okay, now prenatal diagnosis is being possible by molecular analysis of DNA. So this is all about the beta thalassemia major, and now we are going to see the second important clinical syndrome of beta thalassemia, that is your beta thalassemia minor. Now, in case of beta thalassemia minor, this is the good thing is that out of the two varieties of beta thalassemia minor is more common. Okay, and this is a very mild form of thalassemia as opposed to beta thalassemia major, and these patients are usually asymptomatic and they do not require blood transfusion. The anemia over here is very mild. Again, the peripheral blood picture is very similar. There is hypochromia, microcytosis, basophilic stippling with target cells. Bone marrow will reveal mild erythroid hyperplasia. But the very important lab diagnosis in case of beta thalassemia minor is the level of HbA2. The level of HbA2 is raised. It is around 4 to 8% as against normal. Normally it is 2.5 plus minus 0.3%, but in case of beta thalassemia minor or beta thalassemia trait, it is between 4 to 8%. Okay, remember, HbF is also generally normal, or it might be increased occasionally. So for the diagnosis, remember, we have to see the HbA2, and again there are two tests. One is serum electrophoresis that we can carry out for this, and the other test that we can do is HPLC, which is going to show an increased HbA2 levels. Now remember, Recognition. Why recognition of beta thalassemia trait is important? There are two important things over here. One is beta thalassemia minor can be mixed because both iron deficiency anemia as well as beta thalassemia minor can be a differential diagnosis of each other. They can be confused. So we have to separate iron deficiency from beta thalassemia minor. So I'm going to tell you how we are going to differentiate. And second, it has a implication for genetic counseling. So for example, if suppose two individuals, one boy and one girl, okay, they are getting married, and suppose the boy is a carrier plus the girl is also a carrier of thalassemia. So with this, there is a 25% chance that the child born will be beta thalassemia major. So candidates who are carriers of beta thalassemia, or they are beta thalassemia trait individuals, they are subjects for genetic counseling. Now remember, iron deficiency, as I told you, it is the most common cause of microcytic hypochromic anemia, and it is the first differential diagnosis for beta thalassemia minor. So how can we exclude? We can carry out serum iron, total iron binding capacity and serum ferritin level to rule out iron deficiency anemia. But there are certain other parameters also that we can carry out. Now for example, the RDW, that is the red cell distribution width, is absolutely normal in thalassemia minor, whereas it is increased in iron deficiency anemia. And there is another index called as Menza's index, which is MCV divided by RBC. Now the Menza's index is less than 13 in thalassemia minor, whereas it is more than 13 in case of iron deficiency anemia. I hope you have understood beta thalassemia clinical syndromes in detail, and next we are going to discuss about your alpha thalassemia. And for the last leg of today's lecture, we are going to discuss about alpha thalassemia, and then we are going to rest our case. So as we understand that alpha thalassemia is occurring because of deletions occurring in alpha globin genes, which is present in chromosome number 16. Okay. So alpha thalassemia, if we see, okay, it is basically caused by a genetic alteration leading to deletion, okay, and that is going to result in a reduced synthesis or absent synthesis of alpha globin chain. Now normally, as we saw, that there are 4 alpha globin chains, okay, so there are 4 alpha globin genes, and the severity of alpha thalassemia that a patient develops will depend on how many alpha globin genes are affected or deleted. Okay, so just as in case of beta thalassemia, we were having alpha 4 tetramers. In case of alpha thalassemia, we are having beta 4 tetramers, which is known as HBH, also called as it is called as HBH, and we are also one other tetramer, that is gamma 4 tetramer, which is called as hemoglobin Barts. They are seen in different varieties of alpha thalassemia, which we are going to discuss later on. Okay. Now again, this beta 4 and this gamma 4 tetramer, which is formed in alpha thalassemia, they are going to undergo hemolysis, and they will lead to ineffective erythropoiesis. But this hemolysis and ineffective erythropoiesis in alpha thalassemia is far less severe than it is in beta thalassemia. Okay. Now remember, the genetic alteration which is most common in alpha thalassemia, as we discussed, is gene deletion. Okay, gene deletion. Now the clinical syndromes, there are 4 clinical syndromes in alpha thalassemia, depending on how many alpha globin genes are deleted. So the first is your silent carrier, wherein only a single alpha globin gene is deleted. Such individuals are completely asymptomatic with no red cell abnormality. The second clinical syndrome is the alpha thalassemia trait, which is characterized by deletion of 2 genes. Now either 2 genes in a single chromosome will be gone, or from 2 different genes, one allele from each gene will be gone. Okay, so these individuals are very similar to beta thalassemia minor or beta thalassemia trait. Thirdly, we are having HBH disease, okay, wherein there is a deletion of 3 alpha globin genes, and basically it's a severe form of alpha thalassemia which resembles beta thalassemia intermedia. And fourthly, we are having hydrops fetalis, wherein all 4 alpha globin genes are deleted. This leads to death in utero. Okay, if no blood transfusions are given, it is going to lead to death in utero. So we are going to individually discuss the clinical syndromes of alpha thalassemia. So the first is your silent carrier trait. As I told you, it is because of deletion of a single alpha globin gene, and it leads to very slight undetectable reduction in alpha globin chain, and the only symptom is in PBS showing slight microcytosis. The second is alpha thalassemia trait. If you see now over here, it is characterized by deletion of 2 alpha globin genes. Okay. Now remember, it can either be either a single gene can be deleted from each of the chromosome like this, or there can be deletion of 1 alpha globin gene from each of the 2 chromosomes. So either completely a chromosome will lose all its gene, or one. Okay. Now the former, that is this one, is more common in the Asian population, whereas the latter, that is this one, is more common in Africa. Now we have to understand one very important thing over here. Now the clinical feature of alpha thalassemia trait is very similar to that of beta thalassemia minor. Okay, so basically there is minimal or no anemia. There might be slight microcytosis, that's it. Okay, now in case of, but remember, one important difference from beta thalassemia minor is that alpha thalassemia trait, the HbA levels, they are normal or low. Okay, now in case of HbH disease, if we see, it is caused by deletion of 3 alpha globin genes. Okay, now over here basically there's a formation of beta 4 tetramers. Okay, this is called as HbH form. Now this HbH has an extremely high affinity for oxygen, therefore it is not useful for delivering oxygen to the tissues, so it leads to what is called as tissue hypoxia. Okay, additionally remember, this HbH is also prone to oxidation. It precipitates and forms inclusions and leads to red cell sequestration and removal in the spleen. So the result is moderate severe anemia resembling beta thalassemia intermedia. So the HbH disease is characterized by deletion of 3 alpha globin genes. It leads to formation of a form of HbH. There is a formation of beta 4 tetramer, that is HbH hemoglobin, and this is not suitable for oxygen delivery because it is highly having a high affinity for oxygen, and they form inclusions and they get hemolyzed in the spleen. They will get phagocytosed and hemolyzed inside the spleen, and clinically they are mainly presenting as moderately severe thalassemia resembling beta thalassemia intermedia. Now the fourth clinical form of alpha thalassemia is hydrops fetalis. It is the most severe form of alpha thalassemia wherein there is a deletion of all 4 alpha globin genes. Okay, and over here a form of hemoglobin is formed that is having gamma 4 tetramers. Now this is called as hemoglobin Bart's. Okay, it is called as hemoglobin Bart's, and remember this is also having a very high affinity for oxygen just like your HbH. Now remember one thing, that fetal distress, such individuals with hydrops fetalis, they develop fetal distress by the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Okay, and previously without any kind of blood transfusion there used to happen death in utero, but now with blood transfusion the children are getting born, and such children suffering from hydrops fetalis is having severe pallor with generalized edema and massive hepatosplenomegaly, similar to that seen in hemolytic disease of the newborn. Now such children, they require lifelong dependence on blood transfusion for survival, and hematopoietic stem cell transplantation is curative for the patient. Okay. Now with this we have completed alpha thalassemia, and this is the last slide for the day, and this is very, very important. A test that is called as the Nestrov test, that is the naked eye single tube red cell osmotic fragility test. It is the most commonly carried screening test for thalassemia, for beta thalassemia. Okay, it is the most common screening test used for detection of beta thalassemia, mainly in developing countries like India, where we do not have HiFi, HPLC or electrophoresis available in all PHCs. Okay, so the basic principle is that the thalassemia RBCs, okay, they are resistant to osmotic lysis as compared to the normal RBCs. Okay, so what do we do? So for example, we are doing a test in which we have taken a control which is containing distilled water. This is distilled water contained in a control. Over here is also distilled water. Okay. Now what we have done, we have added 0.36% of sodium chloride. Okay, then we have taken a buffered saline in the second test tube. Okay. Now this first diagram that we are watching over here, if you see, let me take a different color so that I will be able to show you. Okay, this first diagram, as you can see over here, okay, over here when we have added the RBCs from a patient who is suffering from thalassemia, okay, from a patient who is suffering from thalassemia. So remember over here what has happened to it, that these RBCs in a patient of thalassemia, okay, when we have added the RBCs in this particular sample, they have resisted osmotic lysis, so they have not undergone lysis, and therefore the background lines, they are not seen in this first case. This is called as a positive Nesterov test. So what is a positive Nesterov test? It is when no lines are seen in behind, it is called as the positive Nesterov test, and this is basically seen in thalassemia patient. It is positive in case the patient is suffering from thalassemia. Okay, now if you see over here in the second chart, when we are giving normal RBCs, when we have given normal RBCs over here, if you can see, so in normal RBCs at 0.36% NaCl concentration, the osmotic lysis occurs. And as a result, because of osmotic lysis, what is happening? That lines are seen. Okay, so when no lines, so basically you can see the lines are seen behind. So when the lines are seen behind, that means osmotic lysis has taken place, and therefore it is a normal test. So remember one thing, that if the lines are seen, as in the second case, it is a negative Nesterov test. It is a negative test and the person is normal. Okay, if the lines, they are not seen, if the lines are not seen, it is a positive, test, and it is indicating thalassemia. It is indicating thalassemia. Remember, it is a screening test, it is not a confirmatory test. Now remember, any condition which can resist osmotic lysis will give this test as positive. So therefore, this Nesterov test is not positive for beta thalassemia, and it is also present in iron deficiency anemia, sickle cell trait, and alpha thalassemia trait. But this is not normal. A positive Nesterov test is not normal, and we will have to carry out further investigations. Okay, so with this, I hope you have understood about thalassemia in details. Thank you very much for watching this particular video.